What's good, guys? Welcome back again. Yes, the MLB offseason is finally over. Spring training is finally ramping up, which means it's time to grade each team's offseason. Let's get into it.
I tell you, little baby, I'm going commercial. Big dress, head short and purple. Baby burger, ooh, queen of the jungle. Heating up, had to pull out a thermal. 20 more minutes till I'm gonna be out of the dark. I'll be shooting my flashlight. Ain't gonna be talking.
This video is being recorded on Saturday, which means games start tomorrow. And when this is uploaded, that'll have been yesterday. So most teams have made all their moves for the offseason, made all their transactions. So we're going to do alphabetical order and start off with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I'm going to try and keep this to a quick video and talk about each team's biggest transaction they made this offseason. But for the Diamondbacks, there weren't really a whole lot. They brought in Joaquin Soria and Asdrubal Cabrera. You weren't expecting them to do a whole lot in the National League West with the Dodgers. As far as grade, I'm going to give them a C, I guess. Somewhere between a C and a D. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. All right, next up, we've got the Atlanta Braves, and the Braves were very busy this offseason. They lost Adam Duvall and Mark Melancon, but they brought in a lot of other big pieces. Drew Smyly and Charlie Morton, those are going to be some huge additions to the rotation. They came up one game short. They had a 3-1 lead in the NLCS, so they were one win away from the World Series. This is already a really good team. They also brought back Marcell Ozuna, so they are absolutely getting an A from me. I don't think there's any debate about it. Next up, we've got the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles had a pretty surprising 2020 season. They were actually not as bad as a lot of people expected them to be, but you didn't really think they were going to make a lot of big moves this offseason. But they did sign Felix Hernandez and Matt Harvey, names yesterday. They also brought in Freddie Galvis. That's going to be a really nice addition. So a lot of veterans that, hopefully can help these younger prospects and develop a good team in Baltimore. Overall, I'm going to give them a C because they didn't make any big signings, but again, they weren't expected to, and they brought in veterans. And when you're in the rebuilding stage, I think that's what you need to do. Next up, we've got a bit of an interesting team to me, the Boston Red Sox. Obviously, the elephant in the room, they lost Andrew Benintendi. That really hurt because I like him. I think he's a good player, but he's going to do great things in Kansas City. However, I believe the Boston Red Sox will be better, addition by subtraction. They brought in a bunch of quality baseball players this offseason. Kike Hernandez, Marwin Gonzalez, Hunter Renfroe, all going to give you quality ABs and really stack that lineup. They also signed Garrett Richards to a 1-year, $10 million deal. That's going to bolster the staff. So I'm going to give them a B. Pretty good offseason for the Red Sox. Next up, we've got a team that disappointed a lot of their fans this offseason, the Chicago Cubs. The biggest move they made was trading away one of their best pitchers, Yu Darvish, to the San Diego Padres. They also lost Kyle Schwarber to the Washington Nationals, John Lester to the Washington Nationals, and Jose Quintana in free agency. They did sign Jock Peterson. That was a nice addition. He's going to hit some bombs off the scoreboard in right field. But they also signed Jake Arrieta, and I think they paid him way too much. So I'm going to give the Cubs a D for this offseason, and that might be a little generous in my opinion. Next up, on the other side of Chicago, we have the Chicago White Sox, and they did not disappoint this offseason. I'm just going to put it out there now, they get an A. This is a young team, they're very good, and they only had to make a few moves, and they made the right ones. They traded for Lance Lynn, they get a top-tier starting pitcher, they added Liam Hendricks to the bullpen from the A's, that was huge, and they also picked up Adam Eaton. That's a nice little signing, a little reunion, and a veteran that can absolutely flip the lineup. I know what he can do in DC, so the White Sox, they're getting an A. Awesome offseason for them. Next up, we have the Cincinnati Reds, and I think a lot of people are being a little harsh on them because they lost Trevor Bauer in free agency, but let's be realistic. I never saw him going back there, so I think we need to cut him some slack for that. They did lose Raciel Iglesias, but they brought in Sean Doolittle to counter, so that's a nice move for the bullpen. They also brought in D. Gordon. That's going to be some speed on the base pass, allows you to steal some bases. So I'm going to give them a C of an offseason. I didn't think they were going to make a whole lot of moves, but I'm sure Reds fans are disappointed they didn't make more. Next up, we've got the Cleveland Indians, and it was a rough offseason for them and their fans. Obviously, they traded Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco to the Mets, and that was almost signifying that maybe this is the start of a rebuilding stage. They did get some nice prospects in return from the Mets, and they also signed Eddie Rosario. He's going to hit some nukes out there. So yeah, the Indians are going to get a D for me this offseason. It was a rough one for them. Rockies fans, I don't even know where to start. You just traded away your franchise star, Nolan Arenado. They also gave the Cardinals $50 million to help with the contract. Daniel Murphy just retired. They haven't made any significant moves, and last time I checked, I think they have the worst odds out of any team to win their division. They're getting a big fat F. Next up, we've got the Detroit Tigers, a pretty bad team, but honestly, they made some fun moves this offseason. They were able to bring back Jonathan Scope, who's a great ball player and an even better person. And they also brought in Robbie Grossman and Nomar Mazara, who are going to hit some absolute nukes. Big left-handed bats to help out that lineup. And again, the AL Central is kind of like the NL Central, a lot of evenly matched teams out there. So I'm not saying the Tigers have a chance to win the division, but it's definitely going to make them a better team. So I'm actually going to give them a B for this offseason. Why not? Next up, we've got the Houston Astros, bang, bang. And the big elephant in the room was they lost George Springer in free agency to the Blue Jays, so that hurts a lot. However, they were able to bring back Michael Brantley, and they got Pedro Baez from the Dodgers, which is going to be a huge addition to their bullpen. And as much as I hate to admit it, there weren't a whole lot of moves that the Astros had to make this offseason. They are a pretty good team despite the scandal. So yeah, Astros are going to get a C from me. As much as I'm not really happy about it, I have to give it to them. All right, next up, we got the Kansas City Royals, and I might be surprising some people, but I'm just going to say it. Sleeper. Yes, I think the Royals had an awesome offseason. We touched on it earlier, but Andrew Benintendi, I think that was a huge pickup. They also got Carlos Santana. I'm a huge fan of him. Mike Minor was a really good move. I think he's going to help the rotation a lot. We were just talking about the Tigers. I think AL Central is up for grabs. It could be anyone's division. I'm going to give the Royals an A this offseason, okay? They're not a good team, but they made a ton of great moves, and I think they're going to be a whole lot better in 2021. Next up, we got the Los Angeles Angels, and while they did make a lot of moves, I think once again, they let their fans down. You've got the best player in baseball, Mike Trout. You got Anthony Rendon out there, and Trevor Bauer was a name that they were looking to go after in free agency, and I thought they were going to get him, and they didn't. And who did they get instead? Jose Quintana and Alex Cobb. Don't get me wrong, those are some nice additions, but are they Trevor Bauer? Is that the head of the rotation that they needed? Absolutely not. And then offensively, they brought in Jose Iglesias, Cameron Maybin, and Kurt Suzuki. Those just aren't power impact bats. But the Angels are a team that I feel like are one move away from actually being competitive for the AL West title, and they just didn't make it this offseason. They're going to get a D for their offseason grade. Next up, we've got the Los Angeles Dodgers, and what is there to say? They signed Trevor Bauer, and they were able to re-sign Justin Turner. That's an A already in my books. They're able to bring back Blake Trinan and trade for Corey Knebel, so the bullpen's going to be great again, the lineup's going to be great again, and the rotation's going to be great again, and they added Trevor Bauer. It's an A+. Next up, we've got a team that surprised a lot of people in 2020, the Miami Marlins. They actually made the playoffs, finishing second in the National League East, and they made some quality moves this offseason. Most notably, they signed Anthony Bass. They also had a really good sneaky pickup in Adam Duvall. That's a guy that can hit 25 to 35 home runs, and they got him super cheap. The Marlins, however, they're playing in a really competitive National League East, and I don't think anyone's expecting them to go back to the playoffs again this year, so they didn't need to make any huge moves, but they really made some nice additions. So I'm going to give them a B for this offseason. Next up, we've got the Milwaukee Brewers, and I think a lot of people are freaking out saying they didn't do enough this offseason, but I think they're going to be just fine. I fully expect Christian Yelich to return to his MVP form, and I think the Colton Wong signing is huge for them. I think he's going to do great things for their lineup, totally turn it around. However, I think if they really want to put themselves up there with the Cardinals as far as being a front runner for the National League Central, they needed to make one more big move. So I'm going to give them a C, but I do expect them to be good this season. Next up, we've got the Minnesota Twins, and it was a busy offseason for them, but overall, I think a good one. They were able to bring back Nelson Cruz, who ages like fine wine. He'll probably drop 40 bombs again this season, and they got the best defensive shortstop in baseball in Andrelton Simmons. They lost Sergio Romo in the bullpen, but they were able to bring in Alex Colomé, and honestly, I think that's a positive trade-off in the bullpen. They also had a J.A. Happ and Matt Shoemaker, and in my mind, they're still the favorites in the AL Central, so I'm going to give them an A. They didn't have to do a whole lot, but they made a whole lot of moves, and I think they're good ones. Next up, we've got the New York Mets, and I was hating on them earlier in the offseason because I was like, they've got the new owners, they got to be making more moves, but they made some pretty quality splashes this offseason. They missed out on Trevor Bauer, and a lot of people thought they were going to get him, especially after some tweets said that he was going there, but obviously they got Carlos Carrasco to help the rotation and picked up Francisco Lindor. They also signed James McCann, who's no JT Realmuto, but still, that's a huge addition behind the plate. And I think right now the Mets are actually projected to win the National League East. I don't know if I would pick them personally, but I'm going to give them an A for this offseason because they had a disappointing 2020, made some big moves, and now they're competitive. Next up, we've got the New York Yankees. They're brothers across the city, and they had a really good offseason as well, making a ton of moves. They lost Adam Ottavino in the bullpen, but they were able to bring in Darren O'Day and Justin Wilson. I think those are two really good pickups going to help their bullpen. They were able to re-sign DJ LeMahieu, and they absolutely love him there, so that's a great reunion. They also added Jamison Talion. That's going to be a huge addition to the rotation, and they also signed Corey Kluber. A lot of people think he's going to bounce back. I'm a firm believer. It's going to be interesting to see what Kluber looks like without a beard, though. But yeah, Yankees making a ton of moves. They're the favorites in the AL East, A+ offseason. Next up, we've got the Oakland Athletics. It's never a quiet offseason with Moneyball and Billy Beane out there. Let's see what they did. Now, the A's, they lost some pretty big names this offseason. Probably most notably, Liam Hendricks is out of the bullpen. They also lost Marcus Semien. He had a down 2020, but people forget he had an outstanding 2019. That's going to be a huge loss for their lineup. But they were able to bring in Elvis Andrus. I think he'll fill the holes there pretty nicely. They also made some really sneaky moves to bolster their bullpen, I think, with Adam Kolarek and Trevor Rosenthal most recently. He had a huge bounce back in 2020. So the A's, I'm going to give them a C for this offseason. I think they'll be competitive in the West. Can they beat the Astros? We'll have to see. Next up, we've got the Phillies, and they had a pretty good offseason. The biggest question heading in was JT Realmuto going to be re-signed? And they were able to get it done, so that is huge. They were also able to bring back Didi Gregorius, so I don't know if you really count those as additions, but having both of those guys back in the lineup, that's huge. They also added Brandon Kinsler and Archie Bradley to their bullpen. I think those are some really good moves, but is it going to make them the best team in the National League East? Probably not. I'll still give them a B because I think they got a little bit better this offseason. Sorry about that, guys. My camera just died. I totally just lost my train of thought, but it's kind of fitting because we just landed on the Pittsburgh Pirates. What moves did they make this offseason? They didn't really add anyone, and they're expected to be one of the worst teams in baseball again this year, probably the worst team in the National League Central. The biggest addition was probably Will Crowe, who they got in trade for losing Josh Bell to the Nationals. So they're going to get an F for me this offseason. Next up, we got one of my favorite teams to watch in baseball, the San Diego Padres. They were busy this offseason, and boy, are they going to be good in 2021. Everyone's going to be focused on the big deal that Fernando Tatis just signed, but they're going to be forgetting about all the big acquisitions they made this offseason, trading for Blake Snell, trading for Yu Darvish. That's a huge addition to your rotation. Also brought in Mark Melancon and Joe Musgrove to help with the bullpen. They've brought in Jerickson Profar. That's going to be a huge addition to the lineup. Padres were a good team in 2020. They're going to be even more dangerous in 2021, and they're definitely going to give the Dodgers a run for their money in the National League West. A offseason for them. Camera keeps on dying, but let's keep on rolling. Next up, the San Francisco Giants. Just talked about the Padres and the Dodgers. They're very good. So are the Giants going to be competitive out there? We'll see. They made some really good moves. They added Alex Wood and Kevin Gausman to the rotation. Those are going to be big. Also added Jake McGee into the bullpen, so they're going to have a strong pitching staff out there. And they added Tommy Lassella to the lineup. So a team that was pretty disappointing in 2020, I expect them to be better in 2021. Giants are getting a B for this offseason. Next up, we've got the Mariners, who had a pretty quiet offseason, but they're not really quite at the point where they should be making big moves to be competitive. They've still got James Paxton in the rotation, and they also brought in Ken Giles for the bullpen. I think that's going to be a really nice move. But the Mariners were a team we weren't expecting to be particularly active, so with the moves they made, I would consider it a good offseason for them. And while I don't think they're going to make the playoffs in 2021, they are going to be an exciting team to watch in the future, so keep an eye on them. I'll give them a C for this offseason. Next up, we got the St. Louis Cardinals. Big offseason for them. Obviously, the elephant in the room. They brought in Nolan Arenado. He's been on their radar for a couple of years now, and they finally got him. Huge addition at the hot corner there. They lost John Brebbia in the bullpen, so that's going to hurt, but they were able to re-sign and bring back Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina. That's going to make the fans really happy. Some good moves there. They also got a ton of money to help out with Arenado's contract. I consider that a huge win, so I'm going to give them an A+ for this offseason. Next up, we've got the Tampa Bay Rays, and it was an interesting offseason for them after coming up short in the World Series. Obviously, the big one is they lost Blake Snell. A lot of the fans are upset that they traded him, but I feel like he's happy to be out of there after the way things went down in the World Series. They also lost Charlie Morton, but they brought in Rich Hill, Chris Archer, and Carl McHugh. Those are going to be some huge additions, so I think they will be pretty good in 2021 again. But was it a good offseason for the Rays? Not at all, so I'm going to have to give them a D. Next up, we got the Texas Rangers. They certainly weren't buyers this offseason, but they made some pretty good moves. They got Mike Folty from the Braves, Mike Foltynewicz. I'm not going to say his name, but that's a great addition for their rotation. They also added Chris Davis. He's going to hit like 40 bombs for you. He's going to have a great season. Very consistent player. And while they did lose Lance Lynn and Elvis Andrews, I don't think people were expecting them to make a ton of moves, so we'll give them a C for this offseason. Next up, we got the Blue Jays, and what a busy offseason for them. They got their guy, George Springer, in the outfield. Huge addition there. They also picked up Robbie Ray and Steven Matz for the rotation. That's going to make them a lot better. They got Marcus Semien. That's going to be a huge pickup. Kirby Yates, huge addition to the bullpen. Great offseason for the Blue Jays. I think their fans have to be really happy. I think they're competitive in the East this year, definitely fighting for a wild card spot. A+ offseason for them. And lastly, we've got my team, the Washington Nationals, followed it very closely, and I think they had a pretty good offseason. They traded for Josh Bell at first base, but they also re-signed Ryan Zimmerman, so that's going to be a nice platoon situation there. They added Brad Hand to the bullpen. That's going to be huge. They also picked up Kyle Schwarber to fill the hole for Adam Eaton in left field, and they added John Lester to the rotation to place Anibal Sanchez. So overall, I think they got better this offseason. I'll give them a B. That's going to bring an end to this video. Once again, I really hope you guys enjoyed, and if you're watching right now, big shout out to you. Liam and I have not done a great job about putting out content on our YouTube platform this off season, and we're going to do a better job of that this year. If you're new around here, make sure to hit the subscribe button, drop a comment, and leave a like, because we're going to be doing videos every Monday starting regular season. We're going to Boston this year. We're going to vlog that trip. We're going to Nats Park a bunch of times once they start allowing fans in there. It's going to be a huge year for the Bat Boys. But yeah, that's going to do it. We're going to have a standings prediction coming out at the end of the off season, and then opening day, Monday, videos all the way through September. You're not going to want to miss it. Stick around. Bat Boys Takeover, baby.